Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm Kathy Rotes with Unity Consulting, where we grow people and develop leaders. This is the second video of the generational series. So if you didn't watch the first, I definitely recommend that you go find the first version where I describe 5 different generations. Today we're going to dig in a little deeper to each of these generations and fully understand where they came from, who they are, and what their preferences are. Okay, so let's start with the silent generation. This is the generation that was born between 1925 and 1945. They are also called the traditionalists. That's it, the traditional generation. Okay, so let's really look at who they are. Let's look at their core values. These are the people that were too young to be in the war, but they lived through the war. They also are the children of the Great Depression. Okay, they have a ton of respect. They are respectable and they respect others. They respect people. They respect authority. They're also conformers and very disciplined. And if you think back to that time, I mean, this is in the 40s and the 50s when they were growing up. We can watch movies, we can see pictures that help us understand. I mean, their respect for authority was very huge. It was very dynamic. You know, they also came from very traditional families. They had a mom and a dad, and probably the mom stayed at home to raise the children. It really wasn't until the silent generation into the baby boomers when the women started to go to work. And it was because of the war. They were working because the men were at war. Okay, so that traditional family is part of who they are. As far as education goes, any formal education was really a dream for them. It wasn't happening. They turn 18 and they got to get to work. They have to make a living to survive. When you look also at their tools that they had at their disposal, let's take telephones for example. These were the telephones that connected to a wall. The rotary phones, right, where you had to dial and watch it go backwards. Each number, it made even a little ticking noise, right? There was a cord attached to the receiver. You couldn't go far from the wall unless you had a really, really long cord. There was no computers like we know today. They didn't have like copy machines. They may have, but not like we do. So everything was very formalized. There was no email. It was a memo that they would receive in the mail or a handwritten letter. Or people would show up at their office to have conversations. So you got to think through. They didn't have a computer at their desk. They had typewriters. They had a lot of what we call manual type of work going on. They also, let's talk about their money situation. They also didn't have debt. You buy it when you have money to pay for it. You put money away for different goals or different purposes that you know are going to come out because that's what happens in life. Okay, so that's the silent generation. That's my grandparents, right? So now let's move into the baby boomers. They were born in 1946 till about 1964. Their core values are a little different. Very optimistic, right? This is when the world's coming out of the war. So very optimistic, and they are very involved. I know from my parents, very involved. They would have friends over at night to play cards. They're involved in each other's lives. They're involved with volunteering. They're in the different Rotary and Lions Club and different groups that the church does or the community does. Very much involved in their world. For them, their family, the start of disintegration in the family, the core family, really started to happen with baby boomers. I know for me personally, my parents did not see that. They still have that traditional family, and thankfully so do I. But that's when disintegration kind of started to happen within the family dynamics. As far as education goes, this is where education was a birthright. The silent generation wanted to make sure that their kids were given opportunities to go to school. And I know my mom tells stories how her parents helped pay for her schooling, helped pay the cash. And they were very involved with her schooling, and they made sure that she got the schooling that she wanted. And it was more of what she wanted to go to school for, not what mom and dad did or what job is available in the world. My mom wanted to be a nurse, and that's what she went to school to do. So then let's talk about that fun communication, right? They still had that rotary telephone, but now is when the touch tone phones started to come into the homes. So instead of the rotary dial, the touch tone with the beeps, yeah, that's it was still on a cord, it was still attached to the wall, but the whole mentality of communication as well was a lot like call me anytime type of approach. And after about 8:30, 9 o'clock, then the phone really didn't ring anymore, but the availability was there and the open communication was definitely there. Now the baby boomers, this is where debt was introduced. This is when credit cards were created, was in the baby boomers era. Credit cards helped boom the economy, right? People were spending more. Well, yeah, this is also when debt came into play. And it's very common that baby boomers, my grandparents paid off their house well before they retired. At least I think that's the story that I heard. Whereas the baby boomers, they still have a mortgage, even if they are retired. They still have a car loan, and they're not afraid to go get another new car because they also have the pensions or the savings to pay for it. Okay, so then let's move on to the Gen Xers. While we're talking about money, Gen Xers are known to have the most debt of all generations. That's my generation. That's me. It's also our goal to get out of debt. Okay, but let's back up. Let's talk about the core values of a Gen Xer. A Gen Xer likes to have fun, but they're also skeptical. And I remember when I read this, I thought, I don't think we're skeptical. Okay, we are. We are skeptical. We're skeptical of everything. And you know why? Because credit cards, because phone calls called spam starts to come into our phones, then we don't believe anything. We're going to Google, nowadays we're going to Google it. We're going to figure out truly what's happening. We're not really going to believe. We're not going to believe the junk mail that comes in our mailbox. We're not going to believe everything that comes across our table because we know that people are trying to sell us or scam us. Okay, so it makes sense on why this is a core value. We also have a lot more informal interactions. Informality, that's the word, is very normal within our system of life. As far as the family goes, this is when latchkey kids became a thing. And I loved it. I was talking to my children about this years ago, and I said, yeah, wow, I remember latchkey. And my kids said, what is that? I said, that's when you take the house key and you pin it on the inside of your outfit or the inside of your backpack and you don't tell anybody where it is. Because my kids are like, what? You guys had house keys? Yes. There were no automatic garage door openers or automatic keypads to get into places. We actually used a house key. And the reason I had to have the house key pinned inside my outfit is because I got home from school before my parents got home from work. Mom wasn't home all day. My mom's a nurse. Those are some crazy hours. She was working. So was my dad. And they had to make ends meet, right? It's just the way life is. I didn't mind it at all. I loved getting home before anyone else was home. And I would race my brother home and get home before him so that I could watch Little House on the Prairie before he got the TV. So it was a good thing. It wasn't a bad thing to have parents working. It was fine. It was good. Okay, so communications. Well, this is when we're talking about Gen X. We're talking about my generation. In my generation, this is when the cell phones came into play. Now, I was in my 20s. I remember when I was 20 years old when my oldest was born, and my husband took a little trip 3 hours away about 3 weeks before the due date. And he had to go to a payphone to call me. He went to a Bears game, right? So he was calling me on the breaks or halftime. I can't even think of what they do in football games. But we didn't have a cell phone. I mean, the cell phones that exist were like huge, and they were connected to cars. They were in existence, but they weren't in every home yet. And it was years later. I remember my trip to Hawaii, and so it was probably in about 2001 is when I got my first cell phone. So the cell phones are happening, but they were well into our younger 20s, early 20 years. Now communication's really changing. I mean, talk about call me anytime. Call me when I'm on the Missouri ship in Hawaii because I've got my phone on me. That's literally what happened. And the person that called me was my boss, and I'm like, can you believe I'm in Hawaii talking to you? But the call me anytime really took play in the Gen Xers years. You know, as far as dealing with money, like I said, we Gen Xers are known to have the most debt. We're more cautious. And I think what happened personally in my life is debt was a necessity to survive because I was 20 years old, still in college. My school loans were paying for diapers and formula as well. And I needed to get my degree done. I mean, education is a way to get there. I needed to get my degree done. So Jordan was born my junior year in college, and I took 2 weeks off because he was born over Christmas break. And then I went right back to school and got the degree, did not take a break in any sorts. Got that degree done because I had to. So with that degree is necessary, but now also debt was necessary because we still needed, I mean, we ate on pretty much nothing, but we made it. We survived. Well, now I'm definitely cautious. I definitely need to pay off that debt. I want to pay off that debt. I'm trying to be conservative. I'm all about saving. I preach it to my kids to have a savings account, to have multiple accounts, to have a Christmas club and a travel account if that's what you want to do. So the reason I am the way I am is because of the way I am, right? The way I started my life. Okay, so then let's move into Gen Y. And Gen Y and Z we're going to kind of put together because Gen Z is so young, we don't fully have descriptions for them yet. But these young people, their core values, they are confident, all about realism, authenticness, if that's the word, authenticness. They're about extreme fun and being very social. Life really is about figuring out what makes you happy. Okay, now as far as education goes, that's incredibly expensive. Incredibly expensive. And I know, well, my oldest went into the military so that he had a way to pay for schooling. My second did not go to school. He didn't want to. He went right into the workforce. And my third, she took a year off of school to gain residency in the state of Wisconsin because we don't live in Wisconsin. That saved her 10 grand a year for her education. She's not afraid to take time off to figure out what exactly do I want to do and how do I want to do it. And I just don't want to throw money away getting a degree. I want to get a degree that I want to use. So, you know, much different than my mentality or my parents' mentality. As far as the family situation, families are more merged now than traditional. It's kind of like the yours, mine, and ours, right? Divorce, very common. I remember when I was younger, it was very much a thing to talk about if somebody was getting a divorce. Nowadays, it's just normal. Now, I'm thankful that my husband and I, my parents and my grandparents, I have a history of traditional families because I firmly believe in the marriage and I firmly believe in fighting through and figuring it out. But this is the world we live in. So these are the people we go to school with, the people we interact with have more of a merged family. I mean, think of holidays, how crazy it is. 4 families to have holidays with, not just 2, right? And then there's communication. Oh, wow. The cell phone is so different now. It's a texting or text communicator more than an audio communicator. I remember talking to a friend that was annoyed. This was back when she was dating her now husband, or it was like 9 o'clock at night. They were texting each other all night long. 9 o'clock, the phone rings, and she's like, why is he calling me? Her mom said, you've been talking to him all night. She's like, yeah, but I don't want to talk. That's the world we live in, right? We don't call, we text, we snap, we do something else besides actually have conversations with people. There's pictures and videos, email, the whole idea of a handwritten note or card. Who does that anymore? I got one in the mail yesterday, by the way. I'm stressed out thinking, how do I respond? I got to send something in the mail? This is crazy. Do I have her email? Maybe I can email her. How about if we just go out for breakfast? That's craziness, right? Well, then let's talk about money, dealing with money. The Gen Y and the Gen Z is kind of about I earn to spend. If I have money, I will go spend it. the savings isn't as prevalent as it is for the Gen Xers. Hopefully that's going to change. Hopefully that information and statistics that are being gathered all over the world are going to be changing. It's interesting when I say all over the world, the generations, every country has their own generation title until you reach Gen Y. So baby boomers, that's an American thing. Silent generation, that's an American thing. Gen Xers even is American. Gen Y, millennials, that is now a worldwide generation. That's the world we live in. It's not just my community, my city, my neighborhood anymore. It's our world. And the world is flat. And the world is small. My brother lives in Sweden. I live in Iowa. My parents and all my kids live in Wisconsin. And it's nothing to, hey, we're going away for the weekend. We're going to Florida. Just for the weekend, right? That's the world we live in. So when you look at this, now let's talk about communication styles. We know the history, we know the values, we know the tools that we've had. Now let's talk about those communication preferences. When you look at communication from that silent generation, they were very formal, what we call formal, right? The memo came in the routing at work, or it was mailed. The letters came in the mail. Then you go up to the baby boomers. The baby boomers were more in person. I'll show up at your door. If I work in the same office, I will go down the hall to your office. I'm not going to call you. I'm going to show up. Now, Gen Xers, they're all about very direct and immediate, which means don't you dare show up at my door. You email, I answer with a yes, no, and we move on because I have so many of those communications coming through. I got to move quickly. And then we've got the Gen Y and the Gen Z. And, it's interesting. Voicemails, don't leave it for a Gen Y or Gen. Don't even leave it for me. Don't leave me voicemails. If I see you called, I'll call you back. But I'm not going to listen to a voicemail because it's probably spam. Otherwise, let's text, let's snap, let's do some other kind of communication. I don't want to do it in person. I don't even want to do it over voice. I want to do it all virtually. So with that in mind, we talk about generations, and somewhat we kind of pick on generations. Oh, the baby boomers, they want to go out for a long dinner and not just quick fast food, or they want to have conversation. Yeah, because that's how they grew up. But also, where we are today, here we are in the year 2020. I'm a Gen Xer. My parents are baby boomers, but we've adapted to the ways of Gen Z, Gen Y. Because we have to. We live in this world today. I have a cell phone. I tend to text more than I do call. I don't listen to my voicemails. I've adapted. And so my parents, my mom has an iPad that she knows how to use. They know how to use their smartphones. They take pictures and send it to us. And I say this in a way like, ooh, they've learned how to do that. Of course we've learned. We've learned with the technology that we're using, right? So have we also learned how to communicate with our people that we work with, that we live with? I taught this class one day, and about 90 seconds after I returned to my office, somebody from the class came running to my office and said, wow, guess what just happened? For the last 3 weeks, I have been emailing this baby boomer, requesting information, asking for information, and I've got nothing, no response to the email, not even sure if they saw it. Today, I realized they're not really keen on email. They like in person or even phone calls instead. So when I got back to the desk, I picked up the phone, called her, and in 30 seconds, I got my answer. I've been waiting 3 weeks to get an answer, and I just got it in 30 seconds because I changed how I communicated with her based on her approach and her preference. That's the trick of life. Whether we like it or not, we have to understand what their preference is. It's no different than understanding their behavioral preferences. The DISC, the Enneagram, the colors, the Myers-Briggs, whatever assessment that we've taken and we've labeled people with, we have to understand their preferences because that's what they're going to connect with. Being in a generation is no different. I may have adapted to the world we live in. I may really like the cell phones of today rather than the rotary phones of yesterday. But I still have old habits within me. Oh, and by the way, those old habits within me, they're not just from my generation. They're from the people that raised me, right? I have habits that my grandma used to do because she was part of who raised me. I found value in it. I connected with it. I have things that my parents have instilled in me, like the money situation and saving money. They instilled it, but I still got debt, right? Now it makes more sense. And our kids will too. So even though they like to earn to spend, you know what? My kids still have savings accounts. They still are saving for different travels they want to do. We still have different pieces within us that are part of the old generations. And we are also adapting to the new. But bottom line, we better figure out how to connect with each person we're dealing with. Because to expect them to use my lingo and we work in my world, that's unfair. That's selfish. We're going to get productive a lot faster if we relate to their world. So take this and share with others. I love growing people and developing leaders. Let's be great together.